let's go ahead and work through the solution, and you can feel free to interrupt me, ask questions if you have them. First thing I'm going to do is get rid of all this distracting comment stuff. Yeah, and hopefully you submitted your elaboration feedback, because I'm going to ask you about it when we're finished. Actually, I'll leave that there so I don't forget. Okay, cool. So the use cases we want to make sure never break for us with this function is we pass a request object, and in our application, this is how we determine whether or not a user is authenticated, because we get this token from the headers, and we resolve that to, or we can verify whether or not we signed that token. And so this is actually a pretty important piece of our application. If this function were to break, then nobody could log in, and that would be pretty terrible. They couldn't, at least they couldn't make any authenticated requests. So this function code is very important. We don't want this to break. So the use cases we want to support are to make sure that when a header is provided like this, we're going to return the full token portion. And if it's not, that means the user is not authenticated. Then we want to just return null and let the caller of the function do whatever they will with that. So I like to start out with the simplest case first, or like the default case. And the simplest case is that get token from header returns null if there is no token header or yeah. As you can see, it's not quite a science for the naming of these tests. So first, let's create our test data, our request object, and this is going to be an object that has a headers property that is an object. And then we'll get our result from a call to get token from header with that request, and we'll expect the result to be null, right? And we run this, we get a passing test. What do we do? Make sure it can fail, and it does, so we're good. Stuff like this, it's pretty straightforward. This is going to pass, but it's a good practice that I always try to do when I'm writing tests to make sure it can fail. Okay, then for our next case, use case that we want to support is that it will return the token if we provide it. So it returns the token when provided. So we'll create actually, let's just copy a couple lines. And we'll say our headers has a authorization, which we can see from here. It has an authorization header. And that authorization, const authorization, is going to be equal to token some token thing. So important piece of valid JOT tokens is that there are 3 bits of text that are separated by periods. And in our implementation, we only care that the first bit of this string is token with a space, and then we take whatever's left. So if it really mattered to you that you really solidify the validation of this token, then you could code it up a little bit better, or be a little bit more solid about it. So in this case, the token is that piece, so we'll expect it to be that, and we'll not that to make sure that it can fail. And then I'm going to take this a little bit further to illustrate the important bit, that this token is that thing. Then we'll put token in that template literal and say that's our token. Any questions? Yes?
Would you go so far as to test if it didn't have a space or it didn't have the headers?
Yeah, so how much do you test? Because we could also test what if the request object isn't even provided, or what if the request headers is a string and not an object? Thank you, JavaScript. We can test tons of things. And that's where typings come in really handy. Make sure that you never call this function with undefined or null or something like that. And then that's a whole set of tests that you'd never have to write. But yeah, if you don't have those things, is it worth the time to test it? I would say you have to consider the time and effort that you need to spend not only testing it but maintaining those tests as well. And so like as far as like evaluating the trade-offs and things, make sure you take those things into consideration. For this app and for this function, it's actually pretty simple, and so I would be fine whether or not you test it. It's unlikely that this code will receive many changes in the future. It's probably just going to be like this forever. But at the same time, it is like totally critical piece of our functioning software. People not being able to make authenticated requests is like a big deal. So being a little bit more solid, I would probably change the implementation a little bit to check for things and maybe log something if something was amiss. And then I would write tests for those use cases as well. But yeah, for our purposes right now, I think this is sufficient. So, good question. Other questions? Did anybody have fun writing tests with Jest? Was that awesome? Yeah, Jest is great. Okay, cool. Last thing. Who wants to share like the key takeaways that you got from this exercise? What are some of the key pieces of this? Yeah.
To test use cases, not like implementation details.
Yeah, use cases, not implementation details. It's hard to do, but yeah, it's important. Any other things that you wrote down? Because I know you all did it. That was the only thing we got. How about the template object factories? We didn't do that here, but
I've seen those at work, I've used them, and I absolutely love it, especially knowing that there's a reason for it now.
Validation, that's good. Yeah, yep, totally works. So here we'll put the authorization right there. We'll accept that. Then we'll just say get rec. We won't pass an authorization header. And then we'll say get rec. And we'll just pass authorization there.